Well, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 14 of the Apothecary Diaries. Oh my god. And yeah, so MaoMao's back, just in the outer court instead of the rear palace, working for Jinshi. And Jinshi, you're trying to create this love story, and it's just not working out for you, so... Oh my god. Well, the bad news is that my internet's still out. The good news is we need to owe Edgar a big thank you in the comments, because Edgar was so kind to go out on Patreon and get me the file for this episode. And they were like, here, if you want to watch this, this will make it so much easier. I won't have to worry about buffering and the internet, because I'm going to be honest, I probably start and stopped last week's episode like 4 times. And it was so frustrating because it was so good. But thank you, Edgar. We owe you a lot. Thank you so much. But we have a lot to talk about. We've got a lot of comments to talk about. I've got notes from last episode that I meant to talk about in the discussion, and I didn't. And we have a lot to talk about from the last eunuch in China. So this is going to be a long intro. I apologize, but there's lots to share. So do you ever have that feeling when you get done with an episode and you get done discussing it, and it was a nice long discussion, and then as you're editing, you're just sitting there like, I should have talked about this too. And that's how I felt last episode, because I had some other things I wanted to come up from last episode. So my notes from episode 13, seeing Sailor Neptune, whose name eludes me. I'm sure I'll get it as soon as we start back up. Did they look like when they left the area that MaoMao found them in? They looked a little disheveled, like maybe they were pulling their clothes up or something like that. What was with the military bell? What was the point of it? I'm sure we'll find out. So those things were crossing my mind. Also, the idea of Jinshi as the gardener of the rear palace, the gardener amongst all of the emperor's flowers. What I came to realization, which you all will probably have commented on by now, and I'll be like, yes, I'm going to talk about that in episode 14, is the idea that he's keeping his brother / dad safe from possible snakes in the garden that could conspire against the emperor. And Jinshi's not happy to be relegated to that position, but he's come to accept it, which is similar to MaoMao and her resigning to this realist view of that's how things are. But Jinshi still dreams and is kind of idealistic even within that scenario. He's like, I'm going to have freedom being in this scenario to do whatever I want to do. I just have to like make lemonade out of lemons. So we're going to talk about that a little further with the comments though. But I wanted to bring that up from last week, and I was like, I should have talked about it in the discussion, and I didn't. So here we are. Marriage 1670 points out that there was an interview with the director of the Apothecary Diaries, and they actually said that in each episode there is a flower that relates to that episode. So obviously we're on episode 14 now, but I feel like maybe by the end of the season in episode 24, it would be cool to go back and see what those were. That'd be really neat. Would really like that. So we might have to keep track of that, Marriage. That would be awesome. Be Happy points out that MaoMao views relationships as transactional. It also gives her a very keen sense of independence. MaoMao doesn't like to owe someone a favor, and if you're going to do her a favor, she'll find a way to repay you. And that's why Jinshi was out of the question for her way back in like episode 9, episode 10. One, payments are, in MaoMao's view, via pleasure, and as pragmatic as she is, she thinks that if you're a eunuch, it equals no pleasure. And I don't know, in this book, they talked about there were some eunuchs that were built, so I'm like, I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, is he a eunuch and we just don't know yet? But is there another part of me that's like, well, you would think he would have maybe opened up about that to her by now, so I don't know. Or maybe she's just so oblivious that she has and is in denial that he's not a eunuch. So we're going to find out by the end of this season, I'm sure. Probably. But also, money. Jinshi is the head eunuch, so apparently he's probably not in need of money. And from the place that he lives in, he's got it pretty damn good. So somewhere she knows that Jinshi won't want to kill her, but if she ever did something that was death sentencing, he wouldn't be able to stop it. And that's where it's like Angst City, and you're just like, and then Anime Annie pointed out that this show illustrates the differences in its characters. Just like when Jinshi was reminiscing about Sir Conan, MaoMao is pragmatic and realistic, And Jinshi seems more prone to nostalgia and could be considered somewhat idealistic when he tells MaoMao that he wouldn't execute her. Yeah, so it's star-crossed lovers. We've got a pragmatic realist of MaoMao, and we have the idealistic dreamer of Jinshi. But we're rooting for both of them, right? So I want to real quick talk about the book. And that is to say I've gotten to part 8 of it, so we're well in now. Basically, we're at the point where Sun Yat-ting, it's 1924, the Emperor Puyi has been expelled, the Republic of China has taken over, and so Sun Yat-ting goes to the Temple of Prosperity, which is the sanctuary for eunuchs. And to stay in the Temple of Prosperity, eunuchs had to normally upfront pay $100. They also had to show that they had been working for 4 years and had no criminal records or no blemishes on their records. They had great reputations. But after the 1924 expulsion, there were a lot of eunuchs that were homeless. And so the temple allowed them to come in if they could pay rent. And wealthy eunuchs even took their wives and their wives' families into the temple. So it kind of became this really cool community. Not cool because everybody was kind of like without a home and then, unemployed. But it was neat to see this community come together with a bunch of people that normally would be ostracized, right? So the book makes a point, and Sun Yat-ting talks about how several once wealthy eunuchs had unfortunately sent their earnings back to their families. And a lot of them had their families just squabble those earnings. Either they built unrealistic things or there was a big opium addiction crisis in early China that gets it's never really addressed entirely, but all the time Sun Yat-ting is like, yeah, they were using all their money on opium, spending it all in the opium dens. I'm like, there was an opiate epidemic, which 100 years later, here we are, in the US, there's a big opiate epidemic. So it's, 100 years, what's changed? So I thought that was really interesting. One eunuch tells Sun Yat-ting that he had been given $2,000 when he left the emperor, but his wife had spent it all. And what was interesting was that Sun Yat-ting, the guy whose wife spent all his money, he's like, well, the emperor's going to let me come work for him, so I'm going to go back. And Sun's like, a eunuch shouldn't have a wife because one of them is bound to die young. And I was like, whoa. I was like, oh my gosh. Apparently, though, Sun Yat-ting talks about, which I thought was interesting in relation to, MaoMao and Jinshi, because MaoMao is very convinced that her and Jinshi, she's like, well, Jinshi's a eunuch, so I don't know why these ladies are wasting their time. But is she in denial or not? That's the big question. But the book talks about how it was not unusual for eunuchs to have wives. A lot of eunuchs were castrated later in life, not as children, so they were definitely more sexually driven. In the late Qing dynasty, it was even considered fashionable for a eunuch to establish a romantic relationship with a palace maid. And I was like, oh, well, a palace maid, you say? You mean kind of like MaoMao and Jinshi, who is supposedly a eunuch? Interesting. But on page 168, they also talk about the idea of, says, easy circumstances breed lewd thoughts, so a popular saying goes. After leaving the palace, some eunuchs would settle down to a life of great luxury with several young wives. Castration, it seems, seldom extinguished sexual desires once and for all. A few eunuchs retained a strong craving for sex even into old age. When interviewed at the age of 89, Sun Yat-ting admitted to having sexual yearnings that could nevertheless find no outlet. So basically, I feel bad for Gaoxian. And Jinshi, if he's a eunuch. Some eunuchs had an obsessive need to acclimate personal possessions. Though unable to enjoy a fulfilled marriage, they derived satisfaction from the mere fact that they had a wife who completely belonged to them. Such eunuchs made possessive husbands. And then it said, when one eunuch found out that his wife had committed adultery, he killed her and chopped her body into pieces. So true crime in China with eunuchs. On the other hand, most eunuchs who got married hankered after a peaceful family life to make up for the hardships and humiliations they'd endured in the palace. A eunuch could do a lot of things with his hard-earned money, buying a house, securing a wife or a concubine, even adopting a son to continue the family line. Even eunuchs could not ignore the ancient teaching of 3 unfilial things to do. To have no son is the worst. I was like, so a lot of eunuchs wanted to have somebody to continue their family, which makes sense. And then there were other eunuchs who became eunuchs after they were already married with children. So a lot of them already had families when they became eunuchs, either as punishment or because they wanted the work. So, and they didn't want their families to starve. So it's kind of crazy to see all the different circumstances that came into play here. It said in some rare cases, a eunuch might get married while pretending to be even a normal, quote unquote, person, which is kind of crazy as well. After obtaining a well-paid position in the palace, he could afford to get fashionably dressed and adorned, and an inexperienced girl might take a fancy to what she regarded as a handsome, elegant young man. And when that happened, the eunuch left the palace to find another job and get married, and the girl usually didn't find out about that mistake until it was too late. So the girl thought she was marrying just a nice, upstanding guy, and maybe he was, but he was also lying that his penis had been chopped off. So there you have it. But marriages attained by fraud often had unhappy endings. So there's a lot going on in this that is talked about throughout this with the Temple of Prosperity. But basically, there was a lot happening with Sun Yat-ting moving into the Temple of Prosperity. I thought it was interesting at one point, he meets up with another eunuch and they go over like their fortunes and their zodiac and everything. And they look up what their birth characters mean. And the one eunuch, Feng Leting, says, let's take a look at the old almanac. And it says, what's in it for me? Profound wisdom. If you know your birth characters, you can look up your lifelong fortune. And Sun Yat-ting said that he looked up the prediction, and according to the 8 characters indicating the exact time of birth, it read, enough food and clothing without wife or children. And he was like, he had read the same words in a divination book many years before in the accounting office. And the other eunuch says, well, it seems that we share the same fate. They looked at each other and broke into a rueful smile. It's like, oh, that's kind of creepy and crazy that that's what their fortunes were. But anyway, the last part about this that I want to talk about is Jinshi. Now, Jinshi is the Empress Dowager, who kind of looms over a lot of this story. She passed in 1908, so a long time before, like 16 years before what's happening currently in the book, but her legacy lives on, and she has an insane reign. Like, she died at age 72, and she basically ruled over China for 48 years. So she had a very impressive ruling. And Sun Yat-ting knew her for a brief period of time, but he knew her reputation, and he learns more about it around this time. So apparently, we talked about this a few episodes back, but Jinshi, as the Dowager Empress, her and her sister came to the palace when Emperor Zhongfang was the emperor. And this is where it gets crazy. This family tree is insane, but Zhongfang had a lot of wives, a lot of concubines, and Jinshi was one of them. And she became the Empress Consort. She became the main one. And she basically, when they first met, Jinshi and her sister Xian, they were basically hanging out with Emperor Xianfang and his younger sister in the summer palace. And Jinshi, when they climbed up the 2-storied pavilion and they sat down with some wine, when Zhongfang stood up to go downstairs, Jinshi came over and bumped against him playfully. Zhongfang was tipsy and had difficulty keeping his balance, and he staggered and would have fallen down the stairs if his sister had not caught hold of him. And so he turned to Jinshi, and you can imagine how angry he was. She quickly knelt and begged for mercy. Your slave deserves 10,000 deaths for bumping into your majesty. I was too careless. The emperor did not believe her excuse. You did it on purpose. You tried to push me down the stairs. And so Jean, the sister, took pity on Jinshi and came to her rescue. Jinshi happened to be pregnant at the time with his child. And Jean asked the emperor to put off any punishment until she had given birth. If she bears you a daughter, she will get whatever punishment she deserves. If she gives birth to a son, that will atone for her crime. So essentially the emperor was like, okay, Jinshi, if your sister has a daughter, I'm going to kill you. If she has a son, we'll call it even. I was like, oh my God. And what ends up happening is, the next is what happens is that, Jinshi was pregnant, not Xian. So Jinshi was pregnant when she bumped into him with the emperor's child, and Jinshi ends up having a son. So basically, it's kind of like if the emperor told Gyokyo, if the emperor told Gyokyo, hey, if you have a daughter, I'm going to kill you for nearly killing me. And if you have a son, we're good. And I'm like, oh my God. So no, Jinshi has a son who ends up becoming the future emperor Tongji. And she ended up not getting in trouble. So it's like, oh, well, glad. Good job there. So what ends up happening is Jianfang ends up dying when Tongji was 5 years old. And so what happens is Tongji becomes the emperor at age 5, and Jinshi ends up kind of using him and controlling him while he's on the throne. And then what ends up being crazy is that Tongji ends up getting smallpox at age 18 before he has any kids. And the eunuchs kind of say that Jinshi kind of exacerbated the smallpox by getting him worked up while he had it, which ended up making the smallpox exacerbating and getting even worse, and he ends up dying because of it. And a lot of the eunuchs kind of rumored that she killed her own kid. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. They say she's very cruel, that she's a very cruel individual because she does kill a lot of eunuchs. So I don't know if that's hearsay from the eunuchs or what it ends up being. But Tongji dies, and so what ends up happening, since he didn't have a son, is that she goes to her sister, whose son was Guangzhou. And Guangzhou was 6 years old at the time, and so he gets put on the throne. But Jinshi doesn't trust Guangzhou and thinks that he might try to, like, throw her out or take her power away from her. So she constantly has eunuchs go and spy on him throughout his time growing up. And some of the eunuchs even suggest that she might have been responsible for murdering him. He ends up dying at a very young age, too. And so before he can have any kids, and so a lot of the eunuchs are like, I think she killed him too, so that he wouldn't have any heirs to the throne. So then what happens is, because Guangzhou didn't have any children when he died, then his nephew, Pu Yi, gets put on the throne at age 3. And she watches over him, and then we're in 1924 after he's been expelled. So, yeah. So it's wild, but yeah, the whole idea that Jinshi was pregnant and the emperor was like, well, if my kid's a son, I guess we're good, but if it's a daughter, I'm going to kill you. And it's like, oh my God. That part, I could understand why Jinshi was maybe so cutthroat, because she's like, I'm in this man's world, and if I'm not cutthroat, then I'm going to die. And that's just how it's going to have to be. And she died of old age. It was like, damn. But I, as cruel as she seems to be based on the stories that they tell of her, I kind of respect her for being in this cutthroat world and just bossing her way to the top and then saying, nah, I'm not going to let anybody take it from me. I mean, insane, but she's so fascinating. I love learning about her. But yeah, I've talked for nearly 20 minutes. Surprising no one. So I'm super excited to dive into episode 14 and just see what we learn. It's some crazy stuff. But in any case, I hope you all are excited. I feel for Jinshi. I'm like, dude. But who knows? Maybe MaoMao, even if she can't become a court lady, maybe it'll be all right. We're gonna start episode 14 of the Apothecary Diaries, and we're gonna do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, I'm really enjoying this second half already. Oh my God. I forgot about the guy with the blue eyes. Okay, so he's blue eyes. Okay, here was my thing. I don't know what it was. Maybe back in season 1, part 1, the first cour, if I'm thinking back, maybe I thought that the guy at the time that had poisoned, I think what it was I thought that the person who poisoned Cohen in the first half, I thought that was essentially Aduo in disguise, or one of Aduo or somebody's like handmaidens. So once we found out more about Aduo and realized it wasn't her, I think my mind just kind of just disassociated from that whole plot line. Was like, well, the one woman committed suicide, but we ruled out this, and we know it's not Aduo, and we found out it was the one woman, but it was connected to the baby, so plot completed. We don't have to go back to this. No, apparently we are going to have to go back to this, because it's not a done deal. And I'm like, what? So there's people at work in all this that may be causing some things to happen. Oh, I love me a good mystery. So, all right, well, let's go through this episode. Because Lee Haku's grown on me a little bit, right? So here's the interesting thing. The crown that Lolan wears when she comes in has Aduo's crown over it. I love, 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 love the aesthetic of the muted colors and then the gold with the reds and the giant red umbrella. Again, MXTX talking about like Hua Chong with the big red umbrella. I just instantly thought of it. She's so pretty. And she has a very like old classy beauty to her. But I just love the vibe she sets of it snowing when she comes in and the snow being on the ground and it's cold and it's icy and it's frigid. It's a very, very, very different environment and tone than any of the other three. Honestly, I feel like each of them could represent a different season. You have Li Shu, she represents spring and springtime of youth. I would argue that Li Hua is summer. She has like a blue, crisp, cool, but she also is fiery and passionate. So summer, she can be hot, and she is hot. And then Gyokyo, I think of fall. I think of fall. I think of sunset. I think of like her colors have more reds in them. And then for her, she's like winter. So I love the different seasons represented, right? She seems very no nonsense. And I feel like they are intentionally making her look suspicious because of how no nonsense she is. And I don't know how to feel about that because I feel like it's either one of two things. Either she is suspicious and she's there to cause a muck, to cause chaos, and she's an inside job, or it's a big old red herring and she's actually, maybe she was forced to go there against her will and she doesn't want to be a part of the games. Maybe she doesn't really care about the Emperor and she was forced to come here against, all of her wishes. Who knows? We don't know her backstory yet. So either the story is setting her up to be an antagonistic force, or it's going to be kind of like Li Hua, where she seems antagonistic, but then once you find out her backstory, she's really just there because of circumstance and she's actually not a bad character and it was a red herring the whole time. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that, but I'm glad she doesn't like repaint the palace. I'm glad all of the aesthetics and all of the stuff change, because that was one thing I was afraid of, is that she was going to come in there and redecorate the entire place, which she kind of does, but I was afraid she was going to like repaint it and all of those memories Jinshi would have of his mother would be gone. And I didn't want that to happen. And also I didn't think I thought maybe the Emperor wouldn't let her remodel because he did like Aduo so much, but is he allowed to have those feelings? I don't know. But anyway, so she comes in with the red and purple and everything, and her actions are very, very apparent in the moment she slings that crown off and she just dumps it in the box like, I don't care, whatever, like treating it like it's nothing. Like that one gesture tells you so much about how she really just doesn't want to be there. Now, the question is, does she not want to be there to the point where she's going to cause problems? Or does she not want to be there just because of whatever's going on? That is what remains to be seen. But anyway, so Gyokyo, I love that the handmaiden's like, are you serious? And she's like, yes, MaoMao's back and I have to make the best of the situation. Gyokyo and Li Hua are like, hey, the Emperor needs to go spend some time with this new consort because we don't want him taking up all our time. So we're going to have MaoMao come in, teach some lessons. It's going to be a great time. I hate that Li Shu had to be there because bless her innocent heart. What she reminded me of was when her soul left her body. If you've ever watched One Piece, she reminded me of the character Perona. And Perona is one of my favorites. I can't say anything more about Perona without giving things away, but the little ghost spirit coming out of her mouth was instantly reminding me of Perona. I love it. But poor Li Shu, that girl's innocence was taken today, which if that was any indication that the girl's innocent, what can we do? So MaoMao, I love that she's trying to grow some herbs in the outer palace. I love she's trying to grow some herbs and she's trying to like get some greenery happening. I feel it's very symbolic that whatever minister, what is his name? It's not Laolin, that's the new consort, but Lakin. I feel like Lakin's lack of shrubberies and lack of foliage around the outer palace maybe is creating him and MaoMao to be a foil, where he's like, he's not into the hippie medicinal herbs and the shrubberies and the greeneries. And she's like, but you need to have those things. So I feel like the series is setting up for those two characters to meet and he's instantly not going to like MaoMao. I have the feeling he's not going to like her because she's meddlesome and she sticks her nose where it doesn't belong. even when she's trying to be pragmatic. But I love Suiren though. Suiren's one of my favorites now because this woman runs a tight ship. This woman's like, I got a job to do and I'm not playing around. She's like, I could take vacation days, but I'm rolling them over eternally. If she was a little bit younger, I'd ship her with Gaoshun. And I'm sure you all are in there being like, actually, Gaoshun and her are only 5 years apart. And I'm like, what? So no, if she was a little bit younger, I'd ship her with Gaoshun, but sad days. It seems a little hypocritical of me because a lot of times people ship older men with younger women. So why can't we ship Gaoshun with an older woman? But she seems considerably older. So nah. And she seems pretty much okay with herself. Also, her hairpin looks a lot like the one that Jinshi wears sometimes. So I wonder if maybe she gives Jinshi some of her hairpins. I don't know. But Suiren runs a tight ship, and her being like, I thought I told you to like clean up the office, girl. I love that the old woman that runs the brothel intimidates MaoMao because MaoMao is afraid she'll sell her off and that she owes her money. And so that's an intimidation factor that she has. This woman terrifies MaoMao on her own. She don't even have to do anything. She's just threatening enough in spirit. And MaoMao's like, never mind, I'm going to go do my thing. And she's like, don't spend too much time on gardening. You have a job. And she's like, she's tough. So then Jinshi's like, well, why do these two women want MaoMao to go over and teach a lesson? What is she teaching them? How to taste poisons? Well, and so Jinshi's like, do you know this new consort? He's like, yeah, you've been summoned to go educate the concubine on something. And MaoMao's like, oh. She's like, that's what they want. She's like, oh, it all makes sense. She's like, And he's like, I'm counting on you. And she's like, oh, don't you worry. It'll all work out. So she brings in all these packages. I'm assuming, are they all like, I'm just going to be crude here. I feel like I'm clutching pearls. I feel like I have to like temper myself in my audience, but I'm like, is it lubricants? Are they toys? I was expecting the packages to be opened up and there was like a bunch of eggplants and cucumbers and being like, are we practicing? It's like, what? So, I just feel the shame. I don't know what is expected to be in these packages unless they are preparatory materials, because the maids all package them back up and take them like, oh, we're going to take these back with us to the palace. So, and there's a lot of them. So I'm like, are these like sex care packages that have been brought in? Why not? But she's like, I can't ignore a request from two concubines, specifically those two, right? She's like, they were nice enough to clearly write the payment amount. She's like, yes. The thing that gets me is that MaoMao is very much a capital of interest, where she's like, she is very much in the idea of, I'm going to peddle my way to get my dad some money and to generate some money so I can pay off. It almost feels like, it feels like she owes a debt to the brothel, which after she tells Lee Haku that she made a room explode, I could see why maybe that is. And the old brothel leader's like, you got to give us some money to pay back your debts, girl. And she's like, shit. So I do love how much MaoMao is all about making money. And she's like, I'm going to sell off these sex toys to the concubines to help pay off my debt. I'm going to get Lee Haku to go back over there and spend some more money on Peirin. I'm going to make sure to sell this pipe after I fix it up and pawn it off. And it's like, girl, I would get rid of that pipe, honestly. I think that pipe, her having it in her possession, is a problem, because if this one minister with the evil vaudeville antagonist monocle, if he decides to try and pin something on her, then it's going to come to Jinshi to have to deal out a punishment. And that's the last thing he wants to do. So I'm like, girl, I'd get rid of that pipe. I would get rid of it in a hot second, because it's evidence and you don't need to have that in your possession. So she's like, now's my chance to write down however much I want Jinshi to pay the brothel for all of these goods. And he's like, are these teaching materials? I love, the saddest thing about this is that Jinshi genuinely seems to want to know what she's doing. And MaoMao's like, no. And here's the thing. We talked last episode about, is MaoMao in denial that Jinshi is not a eunuch? and he's just working there? Is she in denial? Is she trying to convince herself that he's a eunuch when he's actually not? And this is just her in a eternally insane case of denial. My thing is, Gao Shun is a eunuch. We've pretty much established that. And she has no problem. She doesn't want him to know because that means Jinshi would have to follow along. But I think it was Gao Shun by himself. She'd be like, come on in, I guess. And would probably not want him to know, but wouldn't kick him out. But she doesn't want Jinshi to know. And so it's a matter of, does she not want Jinshi to know because she thinks he's a eunuch and he won't get anything out of this, even though we, the audience, know very well otherwise, especially from the book telling us very much otherwise. Does she believe that he doesn't need to be there because of that? 2, does she believe he doesn't need to be there because it would be rather embarrassing for him to hear this in front of all the other concubines who are all like blushing and turning red with shame? Or does she not want Jinshi to know that she knows techniques like this? Because in the back of her mind, is she afraid, just like with the honeypot situation, if he knows she has this knowledge about sexual activities, is she afraid that he's going to ask her to not necessarily perform those acts, but to go into more detail about them? And that's embarrassing to her. And she's like, I don't want to be in a situation where we have to have this conversation. That's what it reads like to me, that she just doesn't want him there because she's like, I know you. You've tried to drip honey on my face being a damn troll. If you find out I know this information about how to have sexual conversations about stuff, you won't leave me alone. So that seems to be the case, which is really, really funny to me. And then I like that Jinshi instantly takes the receipt that she gives and he's like, well, this seems about right. This seems like how much all this would amount to. And Suiren's like, yeah, that's really nice and all, but I couldn't help but notice that the ink's fresh on there, like someone changed the price. And MaoMao's like, oh my God, she's terrifying. Like, Suiren is like, she's like, you don't get to fool my boy. I love it. And she's like, yikes. And Jinshi's like, I don't understand what's going on. She's like, you think you're getting with my son? even though Jinshi's not her actual son, she's like, she feels like a little grandma. She's like Jinshi's little grandma. I can't prey on our young master while this old maid is around. I feel like Suiren and Gao Shun have equal jobs. Gao Shun's job is to make sure that Jinshi does not give MaoMao too hard of a time. And Suiren is there to make sure that MaoMao doesn't give Jinshi too hard of a time. So they're just buffering, right? They're doing a good job of being buffers, right? So anyway, I like that she's like, I can't let him see my precious teaching material. And she just hisses at him to go away. And Gao Shun's like, do you need help with this? And she's like, no, it's my responsibility, Gao Shun. I love Jinshi in the back that he's just like, what could all of this be? He's like all of us being like, what is it? What could this be exactly? Uh-huh. And she's like, if I'm going to do it, I have to go all the way. She's like, if I'm bringing in these sex toys to a bunch of concubines, it's got to be me doing it. Gao Shun permanently has the face of the whole time. So all these ladies show up thinking they're going to follow Jinshi into the... I don't know what these ladies all expected. I don't know why they expected to go into the concubines' like palace with them. They're like, did they really think they were going to be invited? And he's like, no, only high-ranking concubines. The rest of you can all go. And they all just melt away. It feels very much like all of the women that show up to Cinderella's ball, but Jinshi is the prince. And he's like, I don't really want to dance with any of you. And then MaoMao shows up and he's like, but you, with the glass slippers, let's go. So she tells them they have to stay out. They are not allowed to come in. I love, love, love Jinshi trying to eavesdrop to the point where his cheek gets like all flushed up against the door. I love it. She's like, this is for women only. All of their reactions are so great. Gokyo and Li Hua are like, yes, please. We're so ready. Li Shu's like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm here. And then, yeah, Lolan is, I like that the one lady in waiting that MaoMao like terrified is there still. And MaoMao's like, girl, that was like a year ago. Let's be real. Everything's fine. So then we have Lolan. And Lolan looks like she couldn't be bothered. She just does not want to be here. Now, what she says here, I think, is relatively important. She says that's the new Pure Consort, concubine Lolon. Is that flashy southern outfit her usual style? So, there's an important detail that's mentioned here. As soon as I said flashy, I just started. My coworker is really into Victorian literature. I'm not, because I had a teacher in college that really turned me off from it. But since I have no internet, I'm like, what am I going to watch at night? I can't get on streaming or anything. So my coworker's like, well, I have a couple of Victorian, like, movies and stuff you could watch. And I was trying to humor her. I was like, okay. But she gave me this miniseries from BBC called North and South. It's, I don't know. It's Elizabeth. Someone is the author of it. But it's North and South. It's like from the late 90s, early 2000s. It's great. I'm like an episode in. I'm only one episode in. I was like, oh my gosh, Mr. Thornton. Oh, but yeah. But in that story, there is a woman from southern England, Margaret Hale, who moves up north to the industrial towns in England. And it's great so far. I'm loving it. It's very romantic. But she has a flashy southern outfit. But MaoMao says there, is that her usual style? Because her face seems northern, but I can't tell what she looks like under all that makeup. So interesting. So it's like, is she a northern girl that got imported to the South and then moved to the mansion? Is she even Lolon? Is she pretending to be the concubine? We used makeup to establish how people can change, and MaoMao's case in point, maybe she's using makeup to hide who she really is, and she's not Lolon. How do we know? Is she posing and gonna try to, like, destroy from within? Who knows? I feel like the show sets something up but doesn't give you all the explanations and answers right away, and usually it subverts what you think is going to happen, so we'll just have to see. But she looks very bored. Like she'd rather not be there. Anyway, throat's dry. From all this talking. So given her age, the emperor will most likely spend time with her. She seems like she's not too young like Li Shu, but she's not older and not new like Gyokyo and Li Hua. So anyway, I like that, MaoMao's like, not that I care, but it looks like she's not going to cause any trouble. It doesn't look like she's here to get in the way of Li Hua or Gyokyo. So MaoMao's like, all right, this secret technique, I'm going to share it to you. Please don't share it with the other women. Here's your booklets so they're boxes with booklets. And she's like, these have lots of techniques. I love that Gyokyo's like, wow. She's like, great. This will be wonderful. And she's excited, which Gyokyo's a damn troll. There's no telling what that book says, but. And then Li Hua, she's like, oh, well, the handmaiden looks terrified because of what's in the box. What's in the box? The instructions that Li Shu has read has made her soul leave her body. So there's that. And then as far as Lolon goes, she just tosses the book back. Now, her tossing the book back, does that mean she can't read it? Is she really who she says she is? Maybe she can't read the book. So she's tossing it back to the lady in waiting, being like, I don't want this. I can't read it. Maybe it's like a Princess Amidala situation where one of the handmaidens is the actual concubine and she's just one of the handmaidens posing as her. We don't know yet. Because the handmaiden can read it and she seems very perturbed. But yeah, maybe the one concubine who's not paying attention is just like, oh well. Maybe she's deaf. Who knows? But yeah, I like that Gyokyo and Li Hua are so excited, and Li Shu just keeps fainting, just as MaoMao explains. Oh my god, hilarious. And Jinshi's like, I can't hear what they're saying. And Gaoxin's like, why are we still here? And then when she's like, oh, just go ask the emperor later if it worked. I was like, shit, girl. I was also like, how do you know he's going to talk to the emperor? In denial, ma'am. Gokyo's lady-in-waiting Hongmian looks like she's terrified. She's like, goodbye, tired routine. She's like, I get to try new things. And Li Hua's like, well, if I do this and then this. And then I love Li Shu just banging her head against the column. She's like, no, I'm not doing that. Nope, no, no, no. And I'm like, good on you, Li Shu. That's exactly right. And then Lao Lan is just like, no, not interested. Either she can't read, she has a heart of steel, or she's a hoe and she's already tried all these things. So MaoMao's like, I did what I was told. I did my job. Can I leave now? And she's like, I made the 2 people happy that recommended me. And I like MaoMao's little like, no problem. Happy to give you sex talks, you know? Which is hilarious coming from MaoMao, because MaoMao is like the least sexually active female protagonist I've ever seen. And she's just not interested at all, which is so funny. Now, Lolan looks over like she's looking at Jinshi and is in the middle of drinking her tea and just kind of stares over, but then turns away. So I don't know if Lolan was reacting to Jinshi or what the case was. And then she just walks away. And Jinshi's like, well, what kind of lecture did you give? And she's like, you're out to ask the emperor. So then there's, the six handmaidens. They're all forming a circle about to start a ritual. A seance is about to occur as she's sitting there just staring off into the distance. They might be about to have a giant lesbian orgy for all we know. We don't know. I kept thinking of in Star Wars. I have not seen the Acolyte, so I don't know, but I know that there's a plot line in there. There's a Star Wars book I got from the 80s when I was in junior high. I got it at a rummage sale, but it's like, it was called The Wedding of Princess Leia, and it's about what it sounds, and that's why I got it, because I was like, oh, Princess Leia and Han Solo, a romance novel. It was fun. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was very cheesy, but there were these like female, they weren't Jedi and they weren't Sith. They were called like the Night Sisters, and they could use the Force, but they were all just like a big group of women that were all like witches, which was kind of fun. But the Acolyte kind of has adopted that plot line, I'm pretty sure, but I just wanted to compare them to them. So then Mao was like, man, teaching about sex is real hard. And I love that she laughs not about the content, but about the money she's going to make from teaching. I'm like, girl, Mao's going to start an OnlyFans. But it's just an OnlyFans account where she teaches other women sex acts, not anything she does herself. And Jinshi's going to find out and be like, what are you doing? Girl, get that money. That bonus reward. So then there's an explosion. And she's about to go out when she remembers Suiren, and Suiren's like, She's like, you don't need to be going out and getting in trouble. You'll make Mr. Jinshi very upset if you do that. Good on you, Suiren. So she decides to stay in bed. This guy here looks like Ni Huaisang from Modao Zushi, the guy that has the turquoise eyes and the teal robes that sees Mr. Lake in there, right? And he's like, oh, nothing of interest. So he's already figured out it was the flower, too. And he, like, just kicked the little pipe aside. Like, he already knows what it is. Why is he sending Lee Haku to take care of it? I guess to get a second opinion. But he already knows. So it's like, he knows what's caused it. But the question is, who gave the pipe? Who gave the pipe to the guy? Does it even matter who gave the pipe to the guy, right? We know someone gave the pipe to the man. He smoked. And it blew up, which also reminded me of North and South, because in the first episode, which I've only watched episode 1, one of the subplots is that somebody in the cotton plant there was trying to smoke, and Mr. Thornton was afraid that it was going to like light the whole plant on fire. So that was kind of an ordeal. But we don't know as the audience if getting the pipe was something that was intentionally nefarious. Like, did someone give him the pipe thinking it could blow up the building? What was the point? There wasn't anything valuable in the building except food. And they have other buildings with food, so it's not like it was their only supply. But was it to shut the warehouse man up? We don't know. By killing him? We don't know. So, and then the question is, why did the minister not seem to care or make known what the source of the explosion was, if he knew? If it was just a fire caused by a pipe, does it matter whose pipe it was? Is that what the big deal is? We don't know exactly, which is why I'm worried about MaoMao having said pipe. So then MaoMao says, even though he's a eunuch, he has to work outside the rear palace as well. And I'm like, girl, do you not put 2 and 2 together that Jinshi is the emperor's brother? He's doing all this work for him. And so she's like, oh, well. And he's there. It's not like he can just ignore silly bills. So then she gathers up all this paper into her basket. And she's like, it's good paper. I could sell these for a good amount. What a waste burning them all. And so then she's like, the trash burning place is over by the military officers. So, which is where, Gao Xun told her to be careful because you don't want to get in trouble. Those military officers are not eunuchs. So, I find it interesting that they just burn all the papers, I guess the bills and everything, so that they can't be like held as evidence. I think that's interesting, but I'm wondering if that's going to come into play with anything, like with the explosion or whatnot. Who knows? But then Gao Xun says, oh, Zhao Mao. And he gives her the little coat to wear. And she's like, it's cold outside. And she's like, oh. She's like, he's so thoughtful. It's a shame he's a eunuch. The funny part is that Jinshi actively loves her. And he tries, but he's doing it all wrong. He's not doing things the right way. And Gao Xun's just being a little gentleman. And she's like, man, it's a shame he's a eunuch. And it's like, which, you know what? I would get with Gao Xun. I don't care if he's a eunuch. I'd get with Gao Xun. I'd marry that man. I would let him wait on me hand and foot. I'm like, heck yes. Gao Xun's amazing. Mm-hmm. He deserves some loving. Why not? But she bows her head to him to thank him. And of course, Gao Xun immediately realizes, oh shit, I gave her the robe. Jinshi will think that I'm doing this gesture for her. And he's like, oh no, it was Jinshi's idea. I was just giving the robe. It very much read like an MXTX Danmai, where the main character who's in love with the other protagonist, someone else does a kind gesture for them, and the love interest gets jealous and is like, how dare you? That's exactly how this scene read. And I was like, oh my God. And he's like, oh, this is from Master Jinshi. I just delivered it. It's not from me. And she's like, oh, cool. She's like, that's fine. And she's like, he needs permission just to give a warm cloth to a servant. What a bother. So then she probably thinks that Jinshi's like stuck up by making Gao Xun apologize. And I'm like, oh, girl, damn it. She's like, what a bother. And then she looks over. She's like, well, thank you, Master Jinshi. And he's like, oh, well, don't worry about it. Like, oh my God. So she ends up seeing old Mr. Lihaku. And she notes that the outer court is several times larger than the rear palace, but there are hardly any medicinal herbs growing. The only notable ones are dandelions and mugworts, which are abundant everywhere. But then there's some red spider lily here, there, and what does she say that one thing is? She says there's red spider lily and bulb root. So real quick, I wanted to look up mugwort. What is mugwort root like used for? It says that it's a flowering plant used for many potential health benefits, but it also can be invasive and cause allergic reactions. So it's been used in traditional medicines around the world. It says that it's considered safe for most people, but there are some precautions to take. Mugwort should not be used during pregnancy because it can cause uterine contractions that could lead to a miscarriage. It should not be given to children due to lack of safety research. It should not be used while breastfeeding due to lack of safety research. And people with a ragweed allergy should use mugwort with caution because it can increase that allergic reaction. So, interesting. It's been used in traditional medicine for a variety of purposes, including digestive issues, irregular menstruation, high blood pressure, and more. It was used to flavor beer or grüt before hops were used. Oh, interesting. So, interestingly enough, the mugwort, it was used to flavor beer. I wonder if it's been used in the drinks that the one guy is supposedly giving the other guys. Maybe the mugwort is in it. I don't know. But I feel like the fact that she said it's abundant everywhere is a sign that it's going to come into play maybe later. So then she sees the bulb root and she talks about how, you know, if you don't remove the poison, it causes stomach aches. And she's so excited by it. I'm like, girl. And then she's like, oh, Lihaku's over there, but his belt's a different color. I wonder if he got a promotion. He looks bulkier beneath that belt. He's been bulking up so he can get with Peyrin and impress her. And I'm like, dude, you get them gains. Go for it. One thing I really like is that Lee Haku genuinely doesn't care about MaoMao. In the sense that he wants to bother her, but he does find her interesting, where he's like, okay, I'll help you, kid. Sure, I guess. Like, he's genuinely nice to her, and I do appreciate that, because was it back in episode 7? I thought that he wasn't going to be nice to her. I thought he was going to be kind of antagonistic. But the moment she took him to that brothel, he's like, actually, thanks. He's just this big Labrador of a man. And I love the idea that he's fallen in love with Perrin. And, I mean, girl's got some assets. Her back problems, though, she's got to make all that money from his salary so she can pay for back surgery and a breast reduction surgery by the time she's 40. But I love that he just is like looking around while he's having tea with the other, like the young girl, the young concubine, the sister there, and he's just like trying to see her through the crowd. What a dork. What a dork. But it's really cute. And so he's like, I guess once a man has a taste of the heavenly nectar, he can't help but try to get another glimpse. She's like, he's really working hard for the money. So she doesn't want to let it out that she's working for Jinshi, because that could be problematic. And so he's like, well, who would work for you? Who would you work for? And she's like, I wonder the same. So then he lets her investigate the explosion, and they find out that it's flour that was causing it. And obviously, she points out that while things are going good, there is a very good opportunity that somebody could be trying to cause some internal strife, to fire things up. And we know Gyokyo has some political ties with her being in the rear palace. So it wouldn't be unheard of to think that Lolan might have some political ties going on as well. Who's to say that she doesn't? So I like that MaoMao's kind of like, yeah, this could all be tied to some things. We might want to make sure it's not an inside job. But she notes that it's the pipe that caused the explosion, and that somebody was smoking in there when they shouldn't have been. I really like how she tells Lee Haku when he's like, well, how do you know how to make all this? And she's like, I grew up poor. I'm good at making things that I don't have. I'm like, she reminds me a lot of, in Drag Race Canada, there was a drag queen called Isis Couture, and she talked a lot in her confessionals about growing up poor and having to make all of her clothes, and like having to make the things that she used for her drag. And so I feel like if MaoMao was on Drag Race, she would nail that design challenge. She would nail the makeover challenge. Might have trouble with the acting, but she'd be pretty good on it. But I love that. And I love seeing her dad when he's younger, and he's like making the little box and stuff for her, and she's like a little kid. That's so sweet. I love that. And so she shows how to make the little... Also, we should note that MaoMao can make bombs. I don't know if that's relevant knowledge, but girl can make explosives. So we should take that into consideration. Jinshi, your girl, she can make bombs. So just so you know. I like that the one soldier, I don't know if he's a eunuch or not, the one soldier, she said we might need to back up, and he got the hell out of Dodge. He was like, you don't have to tell me twice, girl. I'm going to stand over here. And she was like, okay. And poor Lee Haku, because he is Labrador man, did not move out of the way fast enough. I like that he ends up, we have the moment from the OP where we splash the water on him, and he gets like a cold from it. Like, what a dude. What a dude, right? Like, bruh. And so then she explains how it ended up happening. Says the flour would fill the air and cause the explosion. And he's like, well, how do you know these things? And she's like, well, I might have blown up a room that I was in the brothel. And then the poor brothel owner, like, wrapping MaoMao up and throwing her off the edge. No wonder she's accrued, like, all this debt with the brothel and she's having to pay it back. I'm like, girl, you're being a little bit of an unreliable narrator. You should tell us more about this. But yeah, she's like, man, that old lady's really mellowed since then. So she's like, you should probably not catch a cold. And I like how she shamelessly plugs her dad. She's like, if you want to, go find Loman in the pleasure district, and his medicine can help you a lot, and that'll give you a reason to go see Perrin. And he's instantly like, okay. I love it. I'm glad he's in love with the one princess, right? Like, go over there. And he's like, okay, well, you can leave. And she's like, okay, bye. And she's like, if I clean up this and put a new mouthpiece on it, would it be good again? She's like, I could sell it for a pretty good price. But that said, it seems too impressive for a warehouseman to own. That's probably the sneaky part of it, is the warehouseman, it's not just the fact that he smoked and caused the explosion, but why did he have a pipe that nice? Was it Locken's pipe? What was the reason? If it was Locken's pipe, I feel like Locken wouldn't have had to investigate because he would have figured out, he would have already known what the cause was. But it seemed like he was figuring out just like how MaoMao figured out. He just didn't make the bomb to confirm it because he kind of already knew. She's like, it might be something precious. We don't know. She's like, maybe I'll just clean it up and give it back. Meanwhile, we have in one of the houses. Okay, so one of the houses, I'm wondering if, did Cohen die in one of these houses in the outer court, or did he die in the rear palace? I can't remember. But this guy looks like he's like over the food and the same food and stuff as before. I'm like, is this stuff got honey on it? Is the honey poisoned? Did we establish that was a possibility? There's also water on the ground. And he's broken another pot too, like the last one did. And he says, I'm worthy too, damn it. So he's down on his luck. What is the deal? And then this guy stands up and he's got dark hair and blue eyes, but his eyes are a lot more like sapphire than Lee Haku's are. What the heck is going on? Why are you tied to these guys that are getting poisoned? Possibly. What's the deal? Anyway, so we have the end credits with Jinshi's words are just like his ennui, are just him feeling so sad. So the OP is from MaoMao's perspective, right? The OP, the lyrics are, what do the lyrics say for the OP? I want to go back to those. All of the ED lyrics are from Jinshi's perspective. Hers say, forever brave, you stand before me. And then, what does it say there? Like a cat obsessed with the things you hold dear. Oh, well, is he also talking about MaoMao? Is this also from Jinshi's perspective, talking about her? You radiate with dazzling light, so bright. Or is she talking about him? My gaze is steadfast on you. Enthralled by your thoughts, I get a whirl of excitement like nothing I've seen. I don't know, that seems more like from Jinshi's perspective. Interesting. In your eyes, a deep azure sea. I search for my reflection, yet it's unseen. Now, wait, the eyes, a deep azure sea. Jinshi and MaoMao's eyes, they're not blue. Interesting. So yeah, what is going on? You're unchanging, true to your core, today as always, now and evermore. Interesting. I'm so curious. These trembling feelings are hidden away, lost somewhere, yet here they stay. I am so interesting. From now on, here in this mist, I cherish your views in quiet bliss. I want to go back to the OP just for a hot second, because there was Li Hua looking at the magazine that MaoMao brought. Now, real quick, there were two images there. There were the roses by Laken that were dying. And then from there, we see his eyes start to open. His eyes are blue. We see the woman, it looks like it might be Lolan holding something in between her fingers. And there's red nails and a green skirt. And then his eyes coming up and there's blue roses and she's standing there amidst all these flowers. I'm so curious. And then there's a woman's hand playing shogi with a shogi piece. And then a hand where it looks like his shadow, but the hand has poison on it playing shogi with rocks. What? And then a blue flower. A woman's painting her nails red. There's a baby. There's some backstory with Laken. And then there's all these men and someone there with like a thread, but I don't know if that's supposed to be Jinshi or who this person with. There is Lee Haku is just like insanely buff. Like, y'all, he's got like 4 ditties. And I don't even know what to do with that. Oh my god. Interesting. And Li Shu has the spirit coming out of her like, I don't want to do this. Curious. Something's up with that Lakin guy, and I don't know what part he has to play in all of this yet, but I'm so curious. Anyway, so this episode was really good. I don't know what it's setting up, but it's setting up something, and I'm excited to figure out what happens next with that. So anyway, I'm also curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon to talk more about the Apothecary Diaries. Bye!